My name is Christopher Peter and welcome to another edition of the Christopher Peter Review. Your source for common sense commentary centered on facts, evidence, and data. I hope that we can educate you in an entertaining manner that allows you to come away inspired and informed. In this podcast episode, Americans' Patriotism, Jennifer and I usher in the celebration for America's birthday by discussing why we are proud Americans and why we all should have pride in our nation. Despite our challenges and shortcomings, Americans should love our nation. The perfectly imperfect freedom-loving democracy. Let us begin this special edition of the Christopher Peter Podcast. I am an American who is proud to call the United States of America my home. I am proud to live in a freedom-loving democracy with a free market economy that elevated more people out of poverty than any other economic system known to man. If you experienced past podcasts or commentary, you understand why I believe America is the greatest nation in the world. There are not many nations where one can come with little to no money to their name, no network to leverage, and maybe only the clothes on the back and still be able to find success through hard work, ambition, and innovation. There are many great nations in this world, but few if any actually provide opportunities for people to elevate themselves without relying on welfare programs. Americans take great pride in contributing to their own success, working towards endeavors bigger than their own realm of existence, and establishing legacies for their families and for future generations to follow. In Europe, residents of our allies take more time off and holiday more often than we do. That is good for them. But, they are no longer living in nations on the cusp of the future, rather relying on their history more than their present. America continues to be at the pinnacle of the world stage because of our innovation, values, and responsibility to maintain a peaceful world. I do not think enough Americans appreciate what we have between our borders. In our modern version of America, there are many voices that want to reshape our views of our nation. Try to counter the fact of our American exceptionalism. Some foster hate towards our nation, values, and way of life. Many times our values and beliefs are attacked to cover for public policy failures or to serve as a convenient excuse for a momentary obstacle or to be a target for people who want to cling to certain aspects of our past and not acknowledge other areas. Our traditional values are not the issue. Our national ethos is not the issue. Our rights and freedoms are not issues. These are what makes America great. The issue we have in America is the lack of consistency with our values and affording the same rights and freedoms to all regardless of race, gender, religion, and other demographics. There is no perfect nation. Every European nation has stains in their history and inconsistencies. We are no different. Minorities, especially Black Americans, have not been perceived as equal and even today some still do not give them full consideration. But, America cannot harp on the ills of our past without acknowledging the progress made and the efforts committed to rectify those sins. America is not a systemically racist nation. We have indiscretions inherited from our European history. We cannot pretend it did not exist. But we cannot continue using it as a wedge for division. As a carrot for people not living when the ills of slavery occurred to try to extort benefits from people who may not have any ancestral connection to it. Our path forward as a society is for Americans to set aside discriminatory and other biased views and people to accept the personal responsibility to forge a path for themselves and their families while being independent from the strings of government. Also, the government's role is to ensure fairness by keeping markets free of actual corruption and fraud. The great aspect of America is that it does not promise anything to anyone. Our great experiment in freedom, opportunity, and self-determination affords success to those who work for it. Which is exactly what our national ethos, the American dream, calls for. Our national ethos reaches to our self-reliant, self-governing principles to call for all Americans to create their own success through hard work, ambition, and perseverance. Some in our society do not fully understand that any economy is volatile over the long haul. Meaning that the economy will have good runs as well as some unfortunate downturns. There will be market corrections resulting from certain economic behaviors or poor public policy. Some of these people used a major market correction to baselessly attack our national ethos. During the Obama era, the financial crisis was used as a tool to attack our national ethos, the American dream. The era following the crisis featured a great level of class warfare, blaming the wealthy for the issue created by prolonged poor public policy. Who would have thought giving large mortgages to people without jobs would bring down our economy? But the need to appear like you are promoting housing in the midst of an election is more important than the long-term consequences that will take place well after your time in office concludes. But the fact that the rich were more insulated from the impact of the crisis did not mean that our American dream did not exist. Our American dream still exists. But our national attitude on how to approach supporting a household focuses greatly on being a cog in the system rather than entrepreneurial pursuits and wealth expansion. Many people are taught to find a job and work for a company, the government, or an organization with little to no risk. We do not teach people to invest to expand their wealth beyond their periodic paychecks. We discourage people from business ownership, deeming it too risky. The issue is not the health of the American dream, the real problem is that people are being trained to be a follower and not a risk taker. There is a saying in motorsports that if you follow the leader, you will always follow the leader. If you do the same as everyone else, you end up experiencing the same risk and reducing your marketability. Those at the top are ones who found a path of differentiation, which makes all the difference. As many people demonstrated during the recent pandemic, there was an opportunity to fill the gaps in society, manufacturing hard-to-find medical supplies or providing services to meet the new needs of society. This the American dream. Identify opportunities in society and fill those needs. There is always risk. You just need to make sure you are compensated for taking these risks. Our freedoms and rights may introduce challenges and obstacles in our democracy not present in an autocratic society. Remember that our democracy and system of government is built around limiting and restraining the government, not the people. Americans have the right to question the actions of the government. Americans have the right to exercise their explicitly listed constitutional rights. It is up to the government to find reasonable measures to protect society without infringing on our rights. Leaders need to rise to the challenge and find balanced solutions. Every generation in America came with challenges that threatened our existence. A great civil war. World wars. Global terrorism. We persevered because of our values, traditions, and way of life. As we celebrate another Independence Day, we must remember that we must run towards our values and principles, not away from them. Happy birthday, America.
My name is Jennifer Smith and welcome to another important edition of the Christopher Peter Review podcast. I would consider myself an American proud of our nation as well. Respectful of the lessons from our history, including the good, bad, and indifferent. Each generation faces new challenges, new experiences, and looks at recurring issues in a different light than their predecessors. Sometimes doing things the way they always were done is the right approach. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes we need big changes. Sometimes big changes create greater challenges down the road. Each situation needs to be independently evaluated. As we celebrate another historic year in American history, I want to explore how we move forward towards a brighter, united, and prosperous future while still remaining respectful towards our best ideals. I think all of us can acknowledge we are nowhere near where we hope to be in the current moment of our society. As we watch the fireworks shows this weekend, we hope to be past the economic challenges brought on by the pandemic. Beyond the social tensions and violence. Beyond the presence of global military conflicts. Unfortunately, we have found ourselves in challenging economic times, a world in crisis, and a society experiencing tension and anger beyond belief. I do not think it is healthy for people to look at everything from an extreme position that something is always good, always bad, or always blah. People can be good, bad, and neutral at different times. The issue we are facing is that so much bad is happening at once, and the people we elected to handle or prevent these situations either did not effectively address or show a clear inability to respond to the challenge. Part of restoring America is for Americans to remember that we are a nation built on self-governance. We need to be more aware of the important issues that our society faces and not completely turn a blind eye to how the government will address them. The government is an important institution, but there is a reason why our Constitution restrains the power of government, and why societies need to limit the powers of government. A healthy democracy is one where people are broadly aware of the issues and facts that impact the public policy they have to live under. In America, many people are aware of issues that they feel like impact them, but turn a blind eye towards issues outside of their immediate needs. Many find themselves drawn into the political discourse in our news but do not expose themselves to the facts. Our political discourse is framed to generate emotional reactions that make you defend the people and parties you support and reject the positions of the people and parties you oppose. There is a dichotomy in our political thinking where we view our preferred candidate and party as being completely right and the opposing completely wrong. When that is not the case. Political operatives, being candidates and parties, shape issues, events, and problems in a manner favorable to their platforms or policy proposals. There is a level of cherry-picking done to respond in a manner consistent with their ideological standards. For example, if a candidate ran on raising taxes, he or she may not want to acknowledge that raising taxes during a stagnant or downtrending economy is a poor policy choice. Rather, they will frame it as the targets of their tax policies are not paying their fair share or somehow they are stealing for the other classes. Not convenient to acknowledge that America's rich pay the vast majority of all taxes paid at the federal and state level. Also, it is inconvenient for those calling for a flat tax to acknowledge that the wealthier citizens will benefit from a flat tax because the needed tax rate to fund the government will be high if everyone paid the same rate. The economic reality is our current tax system already makes the wealthier pay more, as they should, but we need to encourage more taxable activities, not necessarily higher tax rates. Separating politics from reality can help find actionable solutions. So the challenge to Americans is to be able to see beyond our political and ideological biases to find workable solutions that work for all. Not restrict society to rigidity ideology. In America, we need to demonstrate the ability to acknowledge our shortcomings at times, and most importantly, be able to forgive. Many nations have moments in time where they would have behaved differently if they had a do-over. In America, we seem to hold our past indiscretions perpetually against ourselves, not wanting to acknowledge the context. We apologize to our European allies about our experience with slavery, not coming to terms with the fact that we inherited the practice from our European founders. Somehow we believe it was more brutal than the version in Europe, which they brought over here. I do not think we should deny that slavery was not a good part of our American experience or that it negatively impacted how we view a major segment of our society. The ownership of human beings was something that should never have been invented. It was wrong. But, I do not believe that something that was eliminated almost 2 centuries ago should be a major point of division to the point that some feel like we need to break into tribes. Sometimes we can be our worst enemies, when we create more problems instead of workable fixes. I do not believe our path forward in terms of race relations is for people to retreat to their respective tribes. That is an obvious step in the wrong direction. That is essentially the return of segregation. In reality, many of us may have more in common with people outside of our respective tribes than with those inside of it. I think we should strive for Dr. Martin Luther King's vision, where we need to look at the character of people rather than their respective demographics. We should be respectful of different backgrounds, experiences, and cultures, but the greater focus should be on the aspect of us that we actively chose. Our demographics should not be the deciding factor for our outcomes, good or bad. Our choices in behaviors, interests, and passions should do more to define us than what we look like. And mistakes in the past should not be repeated. Effective public policy identifies opportunities for change and introduces fixes that are neutral going forward, not vengeful for the sake of politics. Reaching back to our talk about our politics, I feel we as a people need to do a better job of weeding out extremism in our politics through how we select candidates to run for office. We need to place a greater focus on ideas, records, and proven leadership capabilities than quips, attacks, and advertising. I feel we need people in our government who love America. Some people in our government do not seem to share the same level of love for America and may be more sympathetic towards nations with more autocratic social principles. I believe it is important to look at the actions of our political figures and not just their attacks. There is a legal principle that calls for one side to preemptively launch attacks to frame the opposing side with a characterization better suited for the party making the claim. For the party that claims to be the defender of democracy, they are too comfortable with autocratic policies that restrict the freedoms and rights of the people. Too comfortable with changing the government simply for their own political agenda. While they love to label political opponents as agents of Russia, Democrats have embraced their political practices and rejected our social norms and democratic traditions. We do not need a system of government or economic model that places the government at the forefront in place of the people. Rather, we need a system of government that embodies our self-governance principles. A free society should have a free market economy, which affords the economic power to the power, not the bureaucrats. As we move forward in our American experience, we need to ensure that we have elected officials who actually love America and are respectful of freedom and self-determination. Love our nation, not the political power that the government office affords them. My biggest concern is that we have a political party too focused on reshaping America in a manner that will serve their political interest, not the people's. A political party that uses democracy as a buzzword while they embrace autocracy. As we celebrate our nation's birthday, we need to reflect on our values, principles, and traditions. We need to acknowledge that we have come up short in the past, but the solution is to expand these ideals to more people rather than reject them in favor of an ideology that is oppressive and regressive. As we close this episode of the Christopher Peter Review, we thank you for taking the time to experience this edition of the Christopher Peter Review podcast. We truly appreciate your viewership and continue to collaborate to ensure we offer common sense and informative content. The Christopher Peter Review is part of the Christopher Peter channel, where we provide not only the original podcasts, but additional content as well. Common sense commentary on our current events can be experienced weekly on the channel. Access our social media style pieces as well as curated news feed on the Christopher Peter channel. The focus is always providing objective common sense analytical content centered on facts, evidence, and data. We leave the partisanship and political hysteria to other sources. Please continue to visit www.crcrvw.com for more content and commentary. Please check back next week for another podcast episode of the Christopher Peter